Okay, so I've been working on a personal project. I wanted to imagine Bloodborne if it was an animated series or something along those lines. The final project is going to take me a while to get it all the way across the finish line, but I figured why not make some process videos along the way, kind of talking about the art direction, what inspired me, and kind of just break down some of the paintings and the artistic process, I guess. So the first two paintings I want to start with is the Hunter's Weapon Workshop and then Ludwig's Dungeon. And I kind of just did a breakdown of the painting as I went along. And basically you can see for both of them, I started with just a basic line drawing, trying to maintain proper perspective and things like that. But you can see I also didn't stay consistent between them. The Hunter's Workshop was a lot cleaner because I knew that I would be needing to render a lot of different objects, and I wanted to make sure, if I didn't define my line well enough, as I got further into the painting, all these different objects, they needed to be separated, and it needed to be clear that they were separate objects. Whereas with the dungeon, I knew that the final image that I wanted was going to be surrounded in a very dark value, a heavy fog, almost a black sort of silhouetting, or almost like a vignette around the dungeon. So I kind of just willy-nilly kind of blocked in the major shapes and went from there. And then again, just ensured that I maintained proper perspective. I went into a bit more detail with things like the statues because I knew the statues would be a bit more detailed. So you can see here I started just with some basic circles, a couple lines blocking in what I wanted, but then I did go into more detail because I knew that all these ridges and things like that would need a bit more detailing. Same thing as the architecture. And then as we kind of go along, we see I have typically the same approach to both, is where I'm blocking in major sections, major colors, so I immediately can tell that at a glance, if I'm looking at either one of these paintings, I have this, I'm communicating basically the same visual language. I'm putting emphasis on, maybe here I have the light emphasizing this one lantern, I've got the ground lit up, got this statue on the right and left lit up a bit, I want to emphasize that. And so even when I'm blocking in the most basic stage, I want to know that, okay, all of this in the foreground is going to be dark value. It's not, the importance isn't going to be there. The importance is going to be placed on the middle section. And then again, as I get further into it, I further refine that, hey, the back is also going to be quite dark. And, maintaining that middle section is going to be the most important thing. And then with the Weapons Workshop, kind of a similar case is after I do some basic blocking in, I know that I want this lantern to sort of be the light source that's illuminating the workshop. So as we go further along, even if I zoom out, you see the whole time that the highest value area is maintained. Area of interest as well as the light source is right around in the lower half. And then as we get farther out, some of these other weapons, they basically start to fade away and blend in with the background. And then the same thing I did with actually both of these paintings. I sort of have a finished painting right here and then right here, but then sort of to give them sort of signs of life in a way, almost like dust is being settled, or like the light is illuminating dust specks. I added all these little dots of dust, and I plan to animate them and have them be moving around for the final project. But right now, just so I could kind of tell for myself, almost as a reminder, like, hey, I want to have signs of life. I want to have it look like someone's been in this room. The dust is picked up and stuff like that. You don't want it to be a sterile place where it feels like no one's actually ever lived here or been in here. Even if the paintings themselves, I am quite happy with how they turned out, and I feel like they're quite nice. And then another thing I added to the dungeon specifically is I have lots of bits of fog and things like that that I'm planning to animate and have them move around a bit. I might even have the lanterns here flicker, or the wheelchair guy down here, I might have his light flickering a bit. But the main thing is, you know, providing that sort of rich atmosphere through a painting, trying to, you know, somewhat capture the atmosphere of the games. And actually, so something to is kind of funny is with the weapons workshop, I think this took me around 18 hours to paint. That's not including going into the game and getting screenshots and things like that, but I think it was 18 hours to paint this. This, for the dungeon, I didn't want it to take as long as that, and so I was, which I'll get into this later, but I was very inspired in general by the World of Warcraft. They have a lot of like shorts, like animated shorts almost, that they come out with. We're kind of the same thing. They just get a few artists to make some very nice paintings, and then they animate small sections of them and tell a story. And there was a frame in the Shadowlands Revendreth video where there's a dungeon. There's like a orc or something like that being held in a dungeon, and you can see the whole, most of the canvas is completely dark, and then there's just one section where all the emphasis is placed where the light is. I not only just really like this artistically, but I thought, hey, you know, be a bit lazy. I can get away with not rendering, you know, that much of the dungeon because it's pretty dark down there if I just highlight one section, if I just highlight the middle. As you can see, I ended up going into a lot more detail than they did here. Like, genuinely, this was my goal, is to have mostly completely black, no render, nothing rendered, and then have just a bit of the main part, the painted part, you know, be emphasized. I tried to respect that, but as you can see, as I went along, I couldn't help but over render things. Like originally, I didn't even want, you know, the floor here. You can see small sections of stone hinted at, even as we get farther out here. Originally, I just wanted it to be here. Same thing as the stonework. You'll see, I went into more detail than I originally planned, but I'm still happy with how it turned out. And actually, another comparison is, if you can see here, you pay attention to the ceiling, you'll see it's not as, I would say, rendered. It's not as specified as the stonework here, and in the brickwork here, there's more defined lines. There's a little more detail. Here, I was trying to show the ceiling was, you know, a bit rotted, a bit decayed up top, and at first glance, especially in the final project, this video or this image will probably only be on the screen for like a few seconds, so you most likely won't notice that maybe the ceiling is a little under rendered compared to everything else. And I really tried to just stick with that and move on, but I ended up going back the next day and sort of specifying everything, as I said, just a little bit more. You can see that actually, if I really zoom in, you can see that I've got even all these small lines for underlying stone behind this sort of first layer. I've got little highlights along the edge as we go, and yeah, I also just increased the overall contrast between the shapes, as well as sort of smoothed out actually the gradient as it goes back into space. Again, once you can see here, it's a little more undefined and unrefined, and it's nothing big. It was actually, again, I was trying my best to be to work minimally, you know, because you don't always need to over render everything. A really good painter knows what areas he needs to, you know, put the most attention on, and what areas they don't. And yeah, I tried to sort of pull that energy and use that for myself, but instead I kind of looked everywhere else and just, I thought, you know, this just looks too unrendered. It looks a little too messy. I need to go back in and tighten that up and maybe in another painting I can try and go for a less is more approach.